You all should have received the meeting packet by email. A couple of quick Zoom protocols. If you haven't heard from Becca, add your pronouns if you're comfortable and your organization name to your Zoom name. Please stay muted and post questions to the chat. We will bring them forward during the question and answer session. We will be recording this and we'll be posting it online at a later date. Please look for a survey in your inbox right after the session ends to give us some feedback. And lastly, I'd like to introduce Amanda Kinsler, who will be keeping us on time and leading the large group discussion following the presentations. Amanda is an extension specialist at UMass, where she built the food science extension program that provides technical support to small and large scale food businesses. She is a member of the Massachusetts Food Policy Council and the Collaborative Steering Committee. And with that, Amanda, it's all yours.
Great, thanks, Jeff. And thank you all for coming today. We're really excited to have our conversation. As Jeff mentioned, I worked at UMass, and just to kind of reiterate here, the role that I play is to provide education and technical support to producers and processors with a focus in processing in particular, specifically with food safety and product development. And so I'm excited to be part of this conversation in terms of thinking about food from farm to fork, more on the value added side and the details and the nuances affected by that. And our work also conducts integrated research projects that try to address some of those challenges, specifically with small producers and processors in mind, particularly in the realm of the Food Safety Modernization Act. So I'm happy to have this discussion and facilitate it regarding the challenges within the farming, specifically with all the facets of the land, education, regulation, the economic impact, financial components, et cetera. And we have some great panelists today. And let's see, I can't see if we're going to have them pinned or not, but let's see, Ray, are you, I can't see in the, Becca, are we going to have a screen shot on the pinned speakers?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yep.
So I'm going to announce we have Ray Dick, who's the Mass Health Officers Association, is with us today to speak more on with the hat of policy or regulation. We also have Chuck Curry, who's a farmer and owner doing value added from Freedom Food Farm. And we've got Julia Coffey, who is the owner of Micoterra Mushroom Company, or a farm rather, and also owns the Mass Food Delivery program. So thank you all for coming here today. I'm going to turn it over to Ray in just a second, but just to kind of let you all know, reiterate how we're going to do this. We're going to give each of our panelists about 6 to 8 minutes to give a perspective from distribution, value added, regulator, as mentioned. And then we'll ask you all to put your questions in the chat box. And we're hoping to have a real dialogue to kind of talk about some of the challenges faced within this realm. All right, Ray, take it away.
Good afternoon. I was asked today to speak on some of the policy issues related to food chain restaurants, and I'd like to thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm also going to mention some of the particular challenges during the pandemic with some of our establishments here in the Commonwealth and some of the concerns and issues they've had and how regulators are trying to help them through their process. As regulators, our goal is to see a restaurant succeed. We strive very hard to help them with that. The last thing we ever want to do is to cause an owner to incur any financial loss or burdens due to our actions. So our primary goal is always to help the establishment and provide education first. Some of the challenges that we see as regulators that we try to help our small chain food restaurants or even some of our larger ones is, unfortunately, it's not a one size fits all across the Commonwealth when it comes to the food plan review process and application. There's 351 health departments here in Massachusetts, and they all operate a little differently. They all have different size departments, different folks. You might have 2 or 3 health inspectors. Some might have different credentials or education or backgrounds. And so due to their size, there may not always be availability and assistance. So that can certainly be a challenge. The process is not always streamlined in every community. That's really frustrating, I find, with food establishments is, you might go to one town and they require this, and another town has their own rules or regulations. So that can be a real stressful situation. And there are some regulatory hurdles in most communities that someone that's opening a food business or a new farmer that's coming to town might not be aware of. For instance, you might need zoning approval, or if you have a restaurant that has seating, you might need a common vic license or alcohol license. And these are all different departments and processes that can take time and can be a challenge if you're not aware of these processes. Another concern for us as regulators, and I know it's frustrating too for business owners, is there's no statewide inspection software program. So the health departments, you have some health departments that are handwriting inspections, some that are using electronic software and equipment, and a lot of communities conduct inspections, not all, on risk. So it's based on the FDA's risk-based inspectional program. Some additional challenges too can also be things if you're coming in as a food business, some local requirements such as plastic bag restrictions, straws, bans on polystyrene. If you're coming into a community that might have a septic system versus, you have an establishment that's in another community that's on sewer, those can be some issues and concerns, grease traps, drinking water wells. A lot of questions we get for farming in the community, whether it's community gardens or farmers markets, are things on how were the irrigation, how was the water used, was it properly tested? We have a lot of private drinking water wells here in our community. In the community I work in, we require a business to hire a food safety consultant when they go about the regulatory process. It just helps them. It is an additional expense, but it helps them move the process so there's no hiccups. It's seamless for both our ends and their ends. They can help them through all these regulatory hurdles. Unfortunately, not every health department does require a food safety consultant. That's something that we would like to see statewide. For us as regulators, it would be helpful to have some tools and resources that are consistent throughout the state. For instance, on composting food and food donations to restaurants, schools, things of that nature. Here in Westford, we have a very environmentally conscious community, and we are very open-minded. If someone's proposing a new food safety practice or a new food practice, we're more than willing to help them through the process just to make sure it's done in a safe manner, no matter how big or small the scale may be. Another thing we'd like to see for food businesses, we've noticed, I've been doing this for about 15 years here within this department, is it would be nice to see a written emergency plan. Those are not required per the food code for food businesses. We find it isn't until something happens, or for instance, with a pandemic or a food safety recall, that's when an emergency plan would be helpful for them to help them through the process. Some of the challenges with COVID-19, we have noticed with the establishments, municipal offices have been closed in some respects, so inspectors are working from home and trying to navigate contact tracing. We have seen, so what used to be, I went into a food establishment, they're not wearing gloves, is now become, not wearing gloves has now become mass complaint concerns. A higher priority has been shifted in health departments to contact tracing due to COVID. So questions and concerns for a food plan review, what might have taken a week or two to review that plan review, is now taking up to 30 days in some establishments. Access to trade inspectors for both plumbing, electrical, fire prevention has been difficult with working remotely, both for their departments and for ours. Restaurants depend on building a buzz as they open, and that hasn't always been able to. For instance, we've had 4 establishments open during the COVID pandemic, and it's difficult because you're trying to help them through the process and encourage people to come use their business, come check out the new business. And each week there's new governor's guidance that's, this week it might be 40% of your occupancy, next week it's 25%. So that's been a real challenge for them. So we've been trying to help them through that process, promoting their business through social media, town managers, platforms.
Thanks, Ray. Great. I'm going to turn it over now to Cheryl Strader, who is in the restaurant. Is it Soleil? Did I say that? Soleil?
It's Soleil. It's a French
Soleil.
word,
Okay.
and I'll share what that is in a few
Great.
minutes.
I'm going to turn it over to the restaurant's perspective now. And Cheryl, take it away. Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Soleil is located in Roxbury. More specific, we are in the heart of Nubian Square, and our restaurant is located within the Bruce Bowling Municipal Building. And that's the headquarters for the Boston School Department. So you can just imagine what happened with our flow of customers as the administrative staff for the school department began working from home. So coming into Soleil, you would see us serving breakfast and lunch. We also do catering. And what happened is methodically, we saw our catering orders fall off the books, and rightfully so, because people were not meeting in groups. And the same thing happened with our just walk-in revenue. People are not in the building still. It's so many people that used to come through the door and engage with us and get food from our salad bar. And the salad bar no longer is in use. It's a glorified refrigerator. So we have seen a lot happen since March of last year. We also used to rent out the back of our restaurant for private events, and that no longer is happening, for the same reason. I mean, it's a similar thing. It's just, people are being cautious, and rightfully so, and the distancing. So immediately we lost 3 revenue streams, and that's been hard for us to reestablish. Now, our name is Soleil, and that is my granddaughter's middle name. Her full name is Maya Soleil, and in French, it's the term that's used for the sun. So it's a tribute to a 16-year-old young lady, and also to the community, because there is a lot of people that don't see this area as warm and bright. So that's where our name came from. Little bit about us. We opened our doors in 2018. We had anticipated in April of 2020 to open up for dinner. Now, the reason we were doing breakfast and lunch, it just made sense because this is an office building, and that's when we had most of our guests in. So we built out the bar, which was very expensive, but we have not actively used it. So when the time comes, and it will still be a ways down the road, we will also serve dinner. Now, what's happened for us in terms of trying to replace the revenue streams, I began working with a catering company called Cater Cow. And my introduction to them was being able to feed frontline workers. So we were able to pivot, if you will, and make up some of our lost revenue by feeding folks in Mass General, Beth Israel, Faulkner Hospital. So that helped us. And then somebody else introduced me to Easy Cater, another catering company. And we have actually increased our footpath. We have orders coming into us now from some of the pharmaceutical companies in Cambridge. So, our tentacles are getting a little bit further out, so that's helped. But we are not back in terms of our money, pre-COVID, and it's understandable. Some of the things that we have done internally to make that change and to make sure that we are aligned with safety is we are doing, the individual forks, knives, packages, all of that stuff. I literally moved all my catering platters, out of the kitchen. And now we have a plethora of individual type boxes because everything must go out in a separate container. And that's great. So no more mass platters and things like that. So we actually kind of rearranged our kitchen to be COVID ready. I, like a lot of other restaurants, I'm sure, have invested a lot of money now in gloves. It's just, any ready to eat food, anything you're touching that's going out, there's got to be that safety barrier. So we used to pay $25 to $27 for our case of gloves. They are now gone up to $129 for a case. So, it's impacting us in terms of our income, but also what we are spending on the expense side, because our items have gone up. So if you're looking at beef, if I look at my dairy segment of the invoice, everything's ticking up a little bit. We're doing everything we can to be safe. I have so many masks, it's insane. For a while we couldn't find them. And then when I did, I have enough masks, I could probably start selling them. And sometimes our guests come in and we have to ensure that they have their masks on properly. So some of it is just, communicating with our guests as well to, just be safe for all parties concerned, them as well as us. So we're doing everything that we possibly can. I purchased the plastic dividers and hung those myself in between my customers and my staff. So we've done a lot to, make sure that we're in compliance.
Great. I know there's lots more to be discussed, but I'm going to put you on pause now and turn it over. We heard from the restaurant. Thank you for your perspective. I'm going to turn it over to Chuck. He's an owner of a farm, but also is doing the processing side of things. So I'll turn it over to Chuck and we'll continue the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. I just wanted to, our farm is Freedom Food Farm. We're in southeastern Massachusetts, and we do livestock, produce, and grain, regenerative farm. And so part of, we pretty much sell almost all to retail. And so part of that is trying to take a lot of the extras we have and turn them into value-added products, and also to just increase our overall profitability a little bit by doing the value-added. So we rent commercial space, and I'll get into that more. But right now we do all the products we've done since we started. We've done vegetable burgers, we've done bone broth, ferments, some sauerkraut and kimchi, tomato sauce, pickles, hot sauce, a couple kinds of soup, pesto, and jam. We've had experience with a lot of different types of products, frozen or preserved, fermented. They all have different rules depending on what they're doing with them. And so back, I think in 2015, we decided we wanted to start getting into it. And it took us close to 2 years of dealing with, we decided to go through Rhode Island, even though we're in Massachusetts, to get a health license through Rhode Island and rent space at Hope and Main Kitchen, which is in Warren, Rhode Island. They're an incubator kitchen, and so they have like 3 or 4 commercial kitchens they're building, and they lease them out to small businesses that are starting out in food. There's a couple farms, but mostly it's people doing like pickles and jams and some bakeries, things like that. So, we had originally wanted to have a commercial kitchen at the farm and build one out, but there were a couple things that came into the way with that. One, we're leasing the farm, so long-term investments are a little risky. And also there have been some grants available that we could potentially apply to get a kitchen built at the farm. But we were a little nervous after looking into the health permitting process in our town and in Massachusetts in general. I've spoken with a number of farmers and food industry people and food processors or food business entrepreneurs, and they've had some difficulties in their local towns trying to get everything passed through the regulators. So, like for instance, like trying to get chicken slaughtering facility done, like there may be certain rules that they have to get, or and it just can delay the process. And so we were just nervous that we're going to get delayed in this process and not be able to invest all the money into the kitchen and then not be able to get it approved somehow. And we'd also looked into using some other kitchens in the local region that were owned by other people, but they're a lot closer than Hope in Maine. Like there's a YMCA nearby that had offered us to use their kitchen for free. However, when we went to the town health inspector in that town, we were told that we wouldn't be allowed to use it because we're a farm, and it seemed like there wasn't really anything we could do to kind of address that and find out more about what we could do to become approved to work there at that kitchen. So we did see some hurdles in Massachusetts, and it seemed like Rhode Island was just going to be a lot easier to get through. It's a statewide system, and so once you're permitted by the state and you have your license with them, you can use any commercial kitchen in Rhode Island. And also working with the incubator kitchen, Hope in Maine, was really good for us because they kind of were able to streamline the process a little bit more. I think our experience in Massachusetts might have been a little bit easier too if we had worked with like a local kitchen and I forget their name right now, but there's one in Boston that rents out commercial space. And if we had worked with them, since they have a relationship with the regulators in that town or in that city, then we might have had a little bit of an easier time. So working with Hope in Maine to get our Rhode Island license made it a little easier for us. It's not too much further. The facility at Hope in Maine is really great. We've really enjoyed working there and the staff there. So that part really worked out for us. But it did take about 2 years to finally get the health license. And some of the other roadblocks, once we established where we wanted to work, kitchen we wanted to work at, in order to get the license, we needed to have a product first. And we were starting out big, and we wanted to have ferments, and we wanted to have tomato sauce and jams, and all three of those they're processed foods. And so it's a lot more to it than just making soup and freezing it and selling it. So anything that's going to be preserved on the shelf stable, or ferment acidified foods have more steps in them. So once we had to make the product, we had to test it and send it out to a lab to get a test saying that, like if there's sauerkraut, it had to be below a certain pH. If it was jam, it had to have a certain amount of preservatives in it, whether sugar or artificial preservatives, make sure that it would stay shelf stable. And so it took a while to make the products, ship it out. There's really a limited number of labs that are doing that food testing stuff to let you know whether that's going to be allowable or not, like what the acidity is and whether there's enough sugar to preserve it. So that was a little bit time. There's only a couple places in the Northeast that's doing that right now. So once we got that approved, then we were able to go back to the health department and say, here's the products we want to make. Now, can we get our license? And then there was still a few more back and forth, but eventually we did get it, and really been enjoying it since then. And I think it does really add a lot of value to the farm, having these ready-to-eat foods that were mentioned earlier. That's what a lot of people want nowadays. There's not, cooking and things like that. That's not a lot of time is allotted for that in today's world. So the more ready-to-eat foods we can have, the more we can sell. And also we have just so many products like bones. When we send animals out to slaughter, we get bones back if we ask for them. Normally, most farms, they just get thrown away because the farms don't do anything with them. But we're able to turn those bones into a very valuable product, bone broth, and it's also very healthy for our customers, and try to maintain profitability via that method. So overall, yeah, we've really enjoyed doing the value added, but yeah, we wish there was a little more. It was a little easier for a small operation like us to go in and get the license without a huge investment. For a farm, it can be really costly to hire consultants and such to do license.
Thanks, Chuck. Thank you for that. The breadth of the double details of different products is a huge undertaking. I'm going to turn it over now to Julia Coffey, who's also a farmer, as mentioned earlier, but also has the lens of distribution. So Julia, would welcome to hear from you.
1 second. All right. So I'm Julia Coffey. I'm the founder and owner of Mycoterra Farm. Mycoterra is a certified organic mushroom farm located in Western Mass. I've clawed my way up from a closet in the basement over 10 years now, and we've grown to be the largest mushroom producer in the state. The farm has had a really diversified marketing strategy between wholesale, direct to restaurants, and retail at farmers markets. We also have a diversity of products, including value-added mushroom products for consumption, as well as topical products for skincare. But back in March, everything froze, and we were watching our primary income streams of universities, restaurants, and farmers markets closing. And so I founded and launched Mass Food Delivery, a food delivery service, really out of a dire need for access to market. And we were losing markets, so we created one. I had sent out an email to other vendors at the Northampton Farmers Market, seeing if other farms wanted to collaborate. And it quickly snowballed into a delivery service where we aggregate products from, right now we're at about 100 producers, including farmers and value-added producers across Massachusetts and just beyond our borders. We really are focusing on foods that are either grown or produced locally. And how we work is we have an online ordering platform where customers can register and order through our website. We take orders from Sunday noon through Saturday midnight and send, when orders close at midnight on Saturday, we send purchase orders to our suppliers. Our suppliers prepare and deliver the orders on Monday and Tuesday. And then Tuesday afternoon, we aggregate and pack each individual orders that we have coordinated in routes throughout Massachusetts. Currently, we're delivering to most of Massachusetts, except for the Cape and Islands and a few outlying towns in Southeast Massachusetts. And that largely came out of a commitment to our customers. In 10 years of serving the farmers market communities, we had a lot of loyal customers in Boston, greater Boston area that we didn't want to leave without food access. And so there was a lot of neighborhoods that we didn't want to exclude. And so we really went for cast a wide net in the area that we're serving. I'm also a collaborator, a supplier for Sunderland Farm Collaborative. Caroline Pam from Kitchen Garden Farm, right along, as I was on the pivot, she was pivoting right across the river, and she launched a very similar delivery service. It's really amazing how sometimes organically or ideas can emerge in parallel given the right constraints. And so she is designed very much the same, but serves mostly the Western Mass community, the surrounding towns. And so we have, we're really shooting from the hip. I had, while we had experience distributing our own products and working with distributors throughout Massachusetts, we really didn't have any experience in aggregating and distribution. So there was a big learning curve in the technological area, acquiring platforms that can handle the volume that we were receiving orders in, route calculation software. I didn't know that was a thing before, but optimizing our efficiency on the road. And all of the regulatory aspects, FDA licensing, PACA licensing. There's a lot of things that common people, even farmers, don't know about the whole distribution chain that we had to navigate in order to get the business up and running. And we did that very quickly at the beginning of March. I have a great team that really, we worked probably 100 hours a week getting it started and making sure that our partner farms and producers had access to market and our customers had access to food. There's a lot of resource access issues that we've encountered this year. As far as a farmer and a food distributor, I mean, PPE was all alarms across the state, accessing masks, gloves. Also, as a mushroom farmer, we use a lot of, we regularly use gloves, hand sanitizer, isopropyl, a lot of the things that became in high demand. I anticipated early, so I was able to prepare on some level, but we're still, Lysol is still hard to come by. And we ideally would be using about a gallon of it a week. Anyhow, labor also became an access issue. While the $600 boost to unemployment was I think a good move for unemployed restaurant workers and a number of displaced workers. I had a number of employees just stop showing up so they could get that check, and it was really when I was hiring people, got a lot of requests to, can I work off the books so I can get my $600? And just the way the overall approach was rolled out really made it challenging as an essential employer to, labor became an access issue for us. And then the other materials, seeds, raw materials, construction materials, all of the things, the global supply chain breakdown, I know everybody saw, but it really, I really feel like this is our chance to get it right and readdressing our local supply system within Massachusetts for some things that we rely on as a community to help protect us against the next issue will be something that we will benefit from. And then the last thing is food access is not just being able to get to the grocery store. It's geographical, it's physical. We're serving people in urban food deserts and also rural locations. It's also financial access to SNAP and HIP is a big issue, and educating people using those programs is, we're finding a lot of new people enrolled that really don't understand how it works. And there's a lot of language barriers. We're doing a lot of education. And also the technology. Amazon and Walmart can take payments for SNAP online. We are forced to take payments in person. That excludes some customers that are high risk, that cannot risk contact. Last year, we left over $10,000 worth of food on people's doorsteps because we weren't able to contact to pay for them to receive payment. And there's, initially our SNAP HIP request was about 20% of our order volume. Now, as word spread, it could encompass up to 50% of our orders, but we can't serve that many people with the current requirements of the USDA and DTA. So there's, I think, a lot of systemic things that we need to look at in food access, whether it's materials, technology, policy, and payment.
Thanks, Julia. And thanks. Yeah. Thank you all panelists for respecting the window of time for your intro so that we can turn it over to a conversation to the group. I really appreciate that. It makes my job a lot easier. I'm going to just remind all of the participants that your questions are welcomed in our chat box. But to kind of get the conversation going here, I wanted to ask a question. Well, I have a few different questions. The first one here is, Are there emergency responses that you've seen over this last year that you think should be permanent? And if so, which ones would it be, and what do you think we would need to do to make that happen? So let's see, I'm looking at, does anyone want to take a first take on that? Looks like Cheryl wants to. Cheryl, can we start off with you?
Sure, I'd like to jump in.
Thank you.
I was able to participate in the outdoor seating that Boston had for restaurants. Now, typically, if I wanted to do that, it is a long process. It takes a considerable amount of time. There are different agencies and entities that you have to get approval for. So when the city said, look, we can just allow you to extend out into the street and do some sales over the summer, that actually helped us. Now, I did something a little bit different. When you think of outdoor seating, typically you're thinking of table service and, wait staff. I put a grill outside. And because I'm beside a transportation line, hot dogs, burgers, hot beef sausage went well. And that idea came from what I saw at Fenway Park, over in that area. So I would like for that to be a permanent thing that, restaurants can spill over with the proper barriers into the street for additional revenue.
Yeah. What would need to happen how could that happen, do you think? Like how do we overcome that to make that a reality?
So the city of Boston has actually started that process. They are waiving, I shouldn't say waiving, it did not cost any additional money to be extended into the street. I am thinking that normally it probably does, because it's another type of license or another type of a permit. So because there was no charge, that would have to be something that the governor and the mayor would have to just, say, it's okay. We're going to allow restaurants to just spill over into the street, put up barriers and make money. I don't think it's normally that easy.
Right. I think you're right. For sure. Excellent. Any other panelists want to provide a response about thinking about the emergency responses we've seen over the past year of what we could make permanent moving forward?
I have a big one. I know there's the Food Infrastructure Security Grant, which Baker administration took money from the CARES Act and put it into a grant program for local food systems to build a more secure local food system. So farmers could apply and get like a box truck that's going to make it to market without breaking down, or like more equipment so they can increase production. Or I've seen food delivery systems and hubs like Mass Food. I'm not sure if Mass Food applied for one, but food hubs like them applied for them to for more delivery vehicles and more capacity to handle more stuff. Or some farms had more processing applied to like processed chickens or whatever. But it was funded with money from the CARES Act, and they said it ended up being the most applied to grant program ever in the history of environmental and energy. We got 1,200 applications, and I think they only have enough funding for like 200 or 300 projects. And so they're supposed to let everybody know by the middle of October, but they're still reviewing applications because there's just so many. So it's good. Unfortunately, it took a pandemic for Massachusetts to really take the food security system more seriously, but hopefully going forward, they can realize that there is a big need for that and find some permanent funding for that program. So we can get a lot of, I'm sure there's a lot of good applications that went in that probably won't end up getting funded.
Right. Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, I just had a comment on that. We did receive we received 2 grants through the program, one for vehicles and improvements to our processing kitchen, and another one for more SNAP and HIP equipment for the delivery service. However, the first grant we were awarded in September. I received my contract documents on October 28th. I had those turned around and submitted November 2nd. And I still haven't gotten my countersigned contract yet. And I know that's really common across the board. I don't think the state was prepared for the magnitude of this program, but at this point, with so many people awaiting contracts, so many of us receive delivery vehicles. There's no way that we're going to be able to execute these contracts if we don't get them really this week, by the end of the fiscal year on June 30th. So the great program. I'm really hoping that it works for us, but there's it definitely needs to be a little bit more support in the execution side of it, because without the contract, the countersigned contract, we can't begin our project. So we've been on a holding pattern since September.
Thanks, Julia. And I'm hopeful that your contract will be signed this week. Okay, I have, let's see, a few other questions. So many of you use the word pivot. And I think, you know, before the session started, we were talking about having to constantly be adaptive. But I guess I would love to hear from each of you about some of the secret successes of the pivot. And I use that word truly of, you know, is it the pivot? I'm sure it's not just one, but kind of looking back in 2020, what were some of the secrets to your success of surviving, you know, from your business has been able to hold on because you've pivoted? Can you share some of the secrets of success that you've all had in 2020? Julie, can we start with you?
Insomnia. While I pivoted, I began working 2 businesses, and working about 100 hours a week. So I was actually working in an accelerator program where we did a great exercise. It was based on kind of an engineering strategy where you can spend all day planning and asking questions, but sometimes action needs to lead. And so we didn't really know what we were doing. And if we really had to learn how to run a food hub and if we really wanted to get everything figured out before we started, we'd be still in the planning stages. So sometimes it's a matter of acting out of urgency and being willing to sacrifice sleep and personal comforts on some levels, but it was just a matter of adapting and doing what needed to be done to survive, because it was a survival situation.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you for sharing. Cheryl?
One of the things we did, because I did close for a little while, you know, when our foot traffic really declined, it got to a point where I wasn't making enough to sustain my staff. So when we reopened, we did some really cool things to let our customers know that we were back. So we had this movie package. So literally you rented a movie from a company that we entered into a contract with. And so it was Friday night, date night with Soleil. So you rent the movie and then we provided the meal and we would drop the meal off. So it was a marketing thing to get folks, oh, they're open again. Let me start ordering again. Another thing we're getting ready to launch is our prepared meals. So, you know, when you use the word pivot, it's almost like being on a merry-go-round. You know, you just keep going until something starts to really click for you and starts to work. We also started selling some dry good items. You know, one of the things that happened during COVID is restaurants were allowed to sell certain products. So, you know, that was a slight pivot for us. So we had a little Soleil food market. I bought some racks, put them in the front of the restaurant. So someone comes in for a meal, they might get a pound of beans or a bag of rice or something. So, you know, we just tried to increase our revenue any way that we could. Talk about sleepless nights and days. I was there also.
Thank you. Ray, do you have a perspective from the regulator? You know, I think Cheryl just touched upon that convert. For those that aren't familiar, in the food processing side, there's the retail regulations, and then which is food code, and then there's processing wholesale licenses, and they are not the same except for the sweet spot. I'm looking, I'm sure there's a sweet window here that happened here during COVID. Can you kind of give a perspective of how regulators even opened that pivot to be reconsidering some interpretation?
Sure, for us, same thing, working crazy hours, pivoting in the sense that you went from housing inspection, septic, food, to, oh my goodness, how do we figure out how to streamline this for restaurants so that they can have outdoor seating? They can have, for instance, one example is here in Westwood, we have Kimball Farm, and how do we get them to open safely and still have thousands of people on the property and meet all of the pandemic governor's guidance? People are afraid to come get an ice cream cone, but just, maybe we can have some kind of drive up and we can streamline the regulatory process so that people can drive up and get half gallons so they can still make money and they can still produce their products. So we've had to help some of these establishments still be able to open in a safe manner, but be creative and open-minded to their suggestions and help them through the process.
Great, thank you. Chuck, do you have a perspective too about pivoting?
Yeah, for us, I was moving to online sales and home delivery, or mostly home delivery. So we had previously been working with Farm Fresh Market Mobile when we first started as a farm, but we had a transition to all retail, just because kind of our tight margins demanded it. And so then once we also were a 4-season farm, so most of our sales is actually done during the winter months. Like 60% of our sales are, the 6 months from October to March or April or so. And so when we had 2 winter markets that suddenly got canceled in March, and we're like, oh no, what are we going to do? So we went back to Farm Fresh Market Mobile and listed on there. And they were also in the middle of pivoting from mostly selling to restaurants to doing home deliveries. And so we just started listing things in like small 2-pound increments instead of like by the bushel on there. And we're able to do almost as much sales as we were from the winter market through the Farm Fresh Market Mobile. And then we've also been doing some small home delivery in the Somerville area where we also were doing a farmer's market. So yeah, that was kind of a big pivot, and it was definitely a learning curve. There's a lot of online selling platforms. We're using 3 different ones right now, and meaning to look into mass food system delivery, but I don't know if I can handle a 4th right now, but
Juggling act, right?
Yeah, that's been pretty good.
Great. Well, to that end, so I guess, Julia had said something really that struck me powerfully and it sounds like all of you have done this, that the power of action versus the learning part, right? Of a lot of times, and Chuck, you spoke to that earlier, right? Of took 2 years to get things all lined up before you went for value added, to 2020 of let's just go for it because we don't have time to do it the best. And action was really one of the, it sounds like across the board, it was one of the things that I'm hearing in your pivots. But thinking about some of the other things, can you all share what kinds of financial supports or technical assistance, trainings, networks that would be most helpful to you and or others in your field prepare for food chain disruptions? Looking back at 2020, what has been awesome, or how do we take this terrible pandemic and make more lemonades out of the lemons, if you will?
I think even just maybe some basic fact sheets on all the regulations, like Julia was talking about. If you want to do a food delivery system, there's a fact sheet, like here's everything you need to know. Here's the health departments you need to contact. Do you need to have a health permit from each town you're delivering to, or just the town that you're conglomerating everything in? And yeah, I think just more fact sheets like that available somewhere online.
To that end, just as a quick UMass food science resource, we're actually building a fact sheet of all the food wholesale processing regulations, right? So if you're making beef jerky versus a fruit leather, there's 2 different entities. So we have a hit list of different productions, the regulator compliance, and some of the milestones for compliance that'll be coming out later this year. But I think hearing more about all the hurdles you all had to kind of go through to even make it work moments is helpful. Any other resources, technical support networks that you'd recommend moving forward or that you use that were instrumental in 2020?
I stayed active and connected to the Department of Neighborhood Development, the City of Boston, when they would send out their trainings for anything, whether it was notification for grants. I want to become certified as a minority-owned business. So they had, a workshop for that. So just being aware that you should be on everybody's email list, for everything. I mean, I'm on Commonwealth Kitchen's email list. It's just, you have to put yourself out there so people know how to find you. And I don't think I necessarily did that pre-COVID. I definitely was connected to people, but I found that as I reached out, then people would suggest other organizations to me. And it was almost like, you're standing in line, you tell one person one thing, and then it gets down to the fifth person, then like 20 people. So networking for me just increased.
Great. How about you, Ray or Julia? We'll do Julia first because she was faster on the mute.
All right. So buy local organizations were a huge amount of support. CISA and Berkshire Grown were members of both. CISA is right here in South Deerfield. And the first few weeks, I think I called Devon's personal cell phone on a daily basis. But they really, they have a whole organization that can maintain some of the connections that a farmer can't do on a daily basis. And so both CISA and Berkshire Grown, I could call if I had a problem and they could connect me to people with resources or answers or legal advice or financial technical advice. So those were really big. And also I leaned really heavy on our representatives in government, my state reps, Joe Comerford, Natalie Blaze, Jim McGovern. I don't hesitate to reach out for political support when I need it. And I could see like CISA does a really good job of advocating to those people, but I could see maybe something that could come out of this is a really like a farmer or food collective to collectively advocate to those representatives that can then influence policy and funding and everything on a legislative level.
Great, thank you. Ray?
Yeah, I was just going to add, I would say, as Cheryl had said, too, just listservs. I know here in our department, we immediately pivoted to a listserv of all of our establishments. So we could get out the weekly information on all the governor's changes and regulations and requirements. I would say for anyone who is a farmer or restaurant owner who is just looking for some education or resources, to certainly reach out to your health department. We have loads of fact sheets and information, can certainly be better streamlined. I appreciate Chuck's feedback because I did take a bunch of notes where we could maybe change that for the state to make sure that information's out there. One thing I would say too, Amanda, is you mentioned about the UMass extension and how those worksheets. The problem is sometimes I've noticed just from a regulatory perspective is we don't always get that information or see it. Maybe the farmer might get it or the establishment might get it, but we're not always educated on the latest food delivery systems or, for instance, the latest new food technology. So I do think that's important to have a good communication.
Yeah, great. And well, for those that are, so one entity to that, for those that are in the food safety communicating channels, and Ray, you might be interested in this, the FDA funds a region. It's called the Northeast Food Safety, the Northeast Center to Advance Food Safety. And it's a network that channels all, it's a clearinghouse of food safety relevant material. So I can send that to you later, but it's directly, it's for people like myself that provide technical support to stakeholders. So someone like you would probably work on that end too. There's a question from the chat box here. How could a small, local, sustainable ag and local food systems nonprofit organization support local farms and other food system entities during a time of emergency? Anyone want to take a stab at that one?
I think a big thing for us is getting the word out. Like once we did switch to home delivery, helping people know. So I think like by us, we have CMAP as the buy local campaign, and so they're really good about sending out a lot of emails and saying, oh, you know, this farm is now offering home delivery to these regions, or this farm is now going to be doing a pop-up market at this location. So just getting the word out about when things pivot, they're the ones that are getting the word out about the pivot. So yeah, I think that's one big thing, is just maintaining a lot of contact with your members and supporters.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else? Julia, yeah.
I feel like it's a little redundant in what I already called out to CISA, but the connection to resources, CISA was able to connect me to legal advice. Basically, I created a new business, but I was operating it under Mike Otera's DBA. They have a lawyer that's worked with a lot of farms, and they were able to help advise me in creating sustainable entities for the two separate businesses. And so they were able to fund that as well. So that was a huge advantage for me. And there's a lot of unknowns. Like they know some of the things that are unknowns to me. So Amanda, I didn't know you were a person, but Devon's mentioned you. And so that's just being able to really a phone call, somebody to answer the phone and kind of hear out the problem. And they have a good resource tool. When I received my recent food security grant, all of my bank branches are closed, so I couldn't get to a notary from my bank, but CISA has a notary. So I was able to drive to her house and get a document notarized within an hour's notice. So there's a lot of small things that really go a long way, especially when you're busy operating a farm or running a food business 24 hours.
Right, thank you. Any other comments from the panelists? Okay, I'm going to take a pause here and then ask the question to the panelists to see, do any of you have any questions for each other? I told you before, we hope this has been a great conversation, but do any of you have questions within each other to keep the conversation going?
So from a restaurant perspective, I usually purchase, my produce and stuff from Reinhardt. I get an invoice, there's a dairy section, produce section, dry goods section. And if I wanted to start to research local farms in my area, how do I go about finding where the local farms are, let's say within Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan? How do I find out where they are?
Julia, it looks like you're going for it.
If you want to shoot me an email, I can directly help you. But speaking to Western Mass and also CISA, I know CISA has a good map of Western Mass by local farms. And I'm sure one of the Boston buy local, the closer to Boston buy local organizations would probably have a similar map of farms closer to you. But I'm happy to personally help connect you. And I'm seeing Rose saying MDAR has an interactive map for the whole state. So that's another great way to, another resource in that area.
Thank you.
Great. There's a follow-up question also from the one about how small local ag food system nonprofit organizations can support the farming entities. The question is, in terms of policy, do you see a role for more staff or programs at the state and local level working on food systems? And if so, how would that help your businesses? Any perspective on that one?
I would say maybe, you know, the commercial kitchen thing, and maybe having more staff at the state level that could guide you through the process. You know, it can be hard to get someone on the phone who knows exactly what you need to do, you know, because there's just so few farmers calling up the Mass Health Department that they don't even know who to transfer you to. So it'd be great to have like a farm liaison at the Mass Health Department or something, or in regards to that, because I guess they do have some liaisons that are in charge of like the compost operation or specific regulations, but I'm not sure there's really a value added liaison.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that one either. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see here. One other question. As we talked earlier, there was lots of shortages caused with the pandemic, and as a result, we had some flexibility within the regulating perspective, right? With the wholesale licensings on some production for retail, and Cheryl talked about how she utilized that for her business. Do any of you have types of solutions that can impact the supply chain for the future that we could, strategies for improving that type of flexibility?
In terms of increasing the supply chain, can you say more?
Yeah, well, just in terms of the supply chain was impacted across the board, right? From distribution itself and even the regulatory compliance side. So I guess the question is just looking at where we had so many different disruptions across the way between the access, distribution, compliance. Is there anything that we can think about that could be impacting future supply chain that we could enable better flexibility? You know, one example. Sorry, what was that?
I was just going to say, having more support for regenerative type farms in Massachusetts. That's kind of not exactly on the same pike, but thinking about, you know, because in essence, if you have distribution and all that, but you don't have the food, that's really difficult. So supporting farms that are having much lower input. So there are farming methods out there where you can grow food without relying on things shipping in like fertilizer or pesticides or whatever it is you use at your farm to make your food. The less things you need from outside the farm to continue to grow food, the better and more resilient that food system is going to be. So I think really looking into low input farming and having more resources for that type of farming.
Great. Any other comment? Yeah, Julia.
I think it's it really this has broader society impacts. We've really become a very enmeshed in a global economy, and we're really at the whims of global activities. And like we've seen that like our customers have had to adjust their choice preferences, and like, no, we're not going to carry avocados unless climate really changes. We're not going to be producing avocados in Massachusetts, and it's not grown or produced here. And so I think some of it is going to be an adjustment and helping people find alternatives, helping people learn the benefits of adjusting buying preferences and supporting local businesses. We get a lot of feedback, wow, that's really expensive. And farming in Massachusetts is really expensive. And so helping people understand the impacts of their buying decisions and in the short and the long term, and adjusting their taste and preferences. And then on like the farmer supply level, say regulatory, bleach got really hard to come by. We had to adjust from using liquid bleach to bleach crystals. And in say the, which means completely changing our SOPs and mixing ratios. And so on the processed food side, giving some flexibility and some buffer in based on what is available, and really changing what our regulations require based on materials that are available locally.
Great, thank you. Any other comments from the panelists? Yeah, right.
Yeah, I just wanted to say for us too, we put out a lot of education in our community in the summer, especially. I think one of the first things to go besides toilet paper was pasta sauce and pasta. And, for us, we put out more education on canning and preserving. And if you buy fresh tomatoes, putting out those, having people demonstrate those practices, not only to help our farmers and encourage people to buy local foods, but also the food safety, and people were worried about storing food.
Thanks, Ray. We have a question in the chat box here regarding we've had a lot of discussion about online platforms, and someone from the audience is wondering, what about people that don't have the use of technology sophistications? Can any of you speak to any of the resources, or wonder if the state has any software platforms or anything for small minority businesses to use or share? So you have any user-friendly tips within that realm?
So again, I'd have to defer to being active on so many different types of listservs. For example, when the COVID pandemic hit, I was part of a group that formed, it's the Black Coalition it's the Black Hospitality Coalition in Boston. And we just got together out of a need, trying to support one another, try to figure out, for example, Nia, who owns Daryl's. She and I talked. One of the things we came up with is, okay, so you order from Reinhardt, I order from Reinhardt. Let's see if we can't squeeze them to get a better price. You're buying chicken, I'm buying chicken. Why are you paying a different price? Chicken is chicken is chicken. You're getting 10 cases, I'm getting 8 cases. Well, I want, she wants the 8 case price. You know what I'm saying? So you have to really push for what you want. And I think being engaged with so many different types of folks who have resources, information, contacts. I was very politically active with Kim Janey, my state rep, reached out to Ayanna Presley on another issue. You have to put yourself out there and just, you have to chase people, and sometimes you get a call back and sometimes you don't. But then you want to know, who does that person know? And I keep going until I find an answer. So I think that it's a lot of legwork. It requires time. My day doesn't end when the restaurant closes at 3 o'clock. I might not leave here till 5, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, just working on emails, so you just have to grind.
Thank you. Julia, it looks like, do you have a perspective too to share? Yes.
Our whole business is now, the mass food delivery business is based on an online platform. If that goes down, where we really don't have an option, we're going to get a lot more local. But we've had to support some of our customers that don't have access to computers, don't know how to use computers. We've had customers call in orders. We've had hearing assist calls where we've helped people navigate that, and that is time consuming, costly, I feel like, on a state level for consumers, because we're really seeing people without access or ability to navigate technology falling through the cracks. And so I think something statewide on the consumer level would be important. I think question was speaking more towards farmers in that boat, and we see that too. And we also work with some of our producers on the technology side and help support them through listing their products in an online platform. But those were just some of the experiences we've had in navigating the fact that online competencies and capabilities and internet connections really aren't equitable at this point.
Right. So true. Thank you. I had a few other questions, but for the sake of time, I'm going to hold back. But I want to take a moment here to thank all of the panelists for bringing a great conversation and raising lots of the challenges that we faced over 2020 in our food systems. I guess as we wrap up here, this session, we are not over. We are not over. Don't leave me. But let me just tell you what's going to happen. I'm going to first, in a moment,